Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime in Fuego, and if it please you, and it sure as fuck pleases me, join me for a bit of palaver here on Hail to Stephen King, and in this case, I'm gonna double down and say Hail to Mike Flanagan, because it seems, fingers firmly crossed, like it is finally gonna happen. That is Reezy, everybody. Bienvenidos, welcome to the horror show, and some of the biggest, most monumental news dropped on us here Thursday in the year of Sai King 2022. Christmas came early, and that is because, man, here on the 8th of December, we had the announcement that Mike Flanagan and his producing partner, at least, with Intrepid Pictures, I believe is the name of his company, are working with Amazon to develop a Dark Tower television series. I'm doing work this morning, and I'm wondering, why the hell is everybody, like, messaging me? This project is seemingly, finally, transpiring, and that was what all of my fellow constant readers and tower junkies alike were hitting me up about. And when I finally got around to looking on the socials and the messages and things like that, shout out to Mike K, Mike Kearns, Mike's book reviews, my buddy Jason Smith from Sinister Cinema. I had all these different peeps, including some from the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group that were just like, Fuego, you gotta talk about this. You've been talking about this for years. And yes, that is true, because in 2017, when I started doing this program, Hail to Stephen King, it all started out with a tribute to Mr. Bev Vincent entitled The Road to the Dark Tower movie, because he had written a book called The Road to the Dark Tower, and it was about influences, inspirations, and just how King came to put that, magnum opus of 8 books together, and a short story, what am I saying? And so, and so many other tie-ins, that's the thing. I mean, you have things like Salem's Lot that tie into it. You have The Stand, those are heavy hitters, but then you have even smaller things like Everything's Eventual and and even from a Buick 8 that I just did a book of the month of that has a more loose little connection with one character in particular, Lowman. But yeah, this is unbelievable news, and yet the thing is we have to temper our enthusiasms a little bit, because how many aborted attempts have we had for the Dark Tower in just decades at this particular point? Yes, we did finally get the feature film with Idris Elba as Roland Deschain and with Matthew McConaughey as the Man in Black, but that was a massive disappointment. It was an amalgamation, Frankenstein hodgepodge of so many different aspects, and I know King showed the Horneveld, being in Roland's possession finally, so it was another of that cyclical turn without spoiling anything from the books and stuff. And so that's why I was a little bit more forgiving about its many, many faults, of which performances from both the kid that played Jake, whose name eludes me, and also a different-looking gunslinger, and, obviously McConaughey. I didn't think the acting was per se bad in that particular film. It was the scripting, it was the fact that it was such a condensed vision, and yeah, they were expecting to make more films. Initially, when Ron Howard was, shepherding in the property for all of those years, he had Javier Bardem, which I thought would have been terrific casting, and he wanted to do both feature films in theaters and the television series. And according to what Flanagan is saying, he does have a similar vision. And the fact that this is landing on Amazon is especially intriguing because of the fact that they were the last peeps who were actually trying to develop the Dark Tower into a series. Now, Glenn Mazzara, who I believe had ties with The Walking Dead show at one particular point when it was at like the pinnacle of its success, he was the one that developed that pilot that ultimately got shelved and was not picked up, and that is still one of the most elusive white whales that I have been trying to track down through various sources. I know a few other industry, coverage peeps that have got the chance to track it down and see it, and have given it high praise. And it was covering the young Roland story from Wizard and Glass, and then I'm assuming a little bit of the stuff from the Gunslinger and the flashbacks, the first book. But yeah, it ultimately did not get picked up to series. Amazon decided to go in a much more fantasy-centric as opposed to Western-centric direction, which is what we get in most notably the largest chunk of Wizard and Glass being all the stuff in in Hambry, and whatnot. And so, yeah, man, I can kind of understand where Amazon was like, okay, we want to, put all of our eggs in the basket of high concept fantasy. Most notably Wheel of Time, which has a hardcore following, but yet had not been adapted into anything. The stuff from Jordan, and then also that Rings of Power, which is a very big proven IP that had seen significant success on the big screen, obviously, with Peter Jackson and whatnot. So I understand the decision making behind that. But I also understand, especially reading the exclusive Deadline interview, which is what, right after reading that, I was like, I'm supposed to be packing for a trip, I'm going back east to Pennsylvania to see family, and I've got other work that I need to do today, but I was like, nope, I have to at least film this, even if we don't put it up same day. I have to just get this out of my system when it's still fresh, and I'm just bouncing off the walls about it, obviously. But, yeah, so reading the exclusive Deadline interview where Flanagan and Trevor, his partner in his production company process, they had worked with Netflix for the last, 4, almost 5 years, something like that, and they saw significant success up until recently. And there's a lot of insight in the interview about the fact that Netflix is really going through some significant struggles. Now, a lot of people know that they still have huge, just banging hits, like most recently Wednesday. Obviously, Stranger Things is one of their perennial properties, but a lot of other stuff, most notably the fact that they've been existing in the red for a while, also the fact that in these last few years, the streaming wars have escalated significantly, and Netflix is no longer really the top dog that they used to be. You've got HBO Max, and then the impending merger with Discovery that's going to be big time. You've also got everything from smaller players like Paramount and Peacock that have their studio affiliations as far as a theatrical nature. And then obviously you have stuff like Amazon Prime and Shudder, and but then again, they also have a big corporate tie-in too with being owned by Viacom now. So, Netflix is not the only kid on the block, and the fact that they spent so much money on content, according to Flanagan and Trevor, it left them incapable of properly promoting a lot of these shows. And the most recent one, The Midnight Club, based on a lot of the Kristopher Pike books, including the namesake there, it was fairly well received. I didn't love it, but I appreciated aspects of it, but they had plotted it out as being at least 2 seasons. And that's why, after the show was recently canceled, Flanagan went to Tumblr and he's like, yo, it's a travesty. I know that I'm leaving Netflix for Amazon right now. However, I assumed that show was at least going to get the plotted out, outlined second season, of which they had written some of the scripts and stuff for. And so he's like, this is how we were going to answer a lot of those burning questions from the first season that pissed off a lot of people, including yours truly. And, yeah, so the fact that so many shows after one season with Netflix have just been going on the chopping block, it's like, if it's not an immediate success, even if we promoted it or gave very little of a shit about giving any sort of attention to it, doesn't matter. We have so many other shows in the pipeline, so many other unique films that we develop or acquire. Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter! And so, for that reason, yeah, he was like, this was the ideal time despite the success that they saw, most notably with Midnight Mass, that I contend, even though I loved the 2 previous Stephen King adaptations that Mike Flanagan did in Gerald's Game, the allegedly unfilmable Gerald's Game, which I still want a physical copy of. Netflix, you've released physical copies of stuff like Stranger Things and a few other bits, but, and then obviously the theatrical Dr. Sleep, and even more so the extended director's cut that's broken up into chapters, the sequel to The Shining that Mike did just an amazing job with. So I still contend, though, that the most Stephen King thing that Mike Flanagan has ever done is Midnight Mass, and I love The Haunting of Hill House, and to a lesser degree Bly Manor, but I still think, Midnight Mass is it's his masterclass. It's the greatest thing that he has ever done up until this point in his career. And he has gone on record, Mr. Flanagan, many times over the last few years. He's been sprinkling in the fact that, yeah, The Dark Tower is his holy grail. It is his dream project. It's what he has wanted to do, as he says in the Deadline interview, since he was an undergrad. And I think this is the best time for me to actually jump into a few excerpts from this interview. And so these are the deets that we have. So this is where I have to also say, temper our enthusiasm, because it's not guaranteed to go to series. And another thing that I have to mention before I jump into this quote is the fact that this, he says on TikTok recently, and I'm not sure if that was earlier today or yesterday, but Cecil, the founder of the Feast here on the Horror Show, sends me a TikTok this morning that I didn't see until I was breaking and checking messages and socials and whatnot a few hours into the day, and it was Flanagan on TikTok answering a reader question, or a viewer question, whatever you want to say, and he was like, I have actually had the Dark Tower rights for some time now, and that's where the gears start turning into your head and give some clarification to the fact that he actually has these rights carved out of his Amazon deal. So that means that he doesn't own them in this window of development in conjunction with Amazon. So he could potentially develop this project outside of it. So he has those rights. And just to get some clarification about his process about this, so Flanagan says, I wrote a pilot. We view it as a series that's going at least 5 seasons. And having lived with this project as long as I have an enormous amount of it worked out in my brain. But I have a pilot script I'm thrilled with and a very detailed outline for the first season and a broader outline for the subsequent seasons. I think eventually, if we're able to get it going, there are some other writers I want to fold into that process whom I've worked with before. I think they would be really fabulous for a very small, intimate writer's room where we can continue to break it. That's another thing that I have to mention, is that one of the bits that I think made Blind Manor struggle, and perhaps to a different degree, the Midnight Club, is the fact that as opposed to Midnight Mass and, The Haunting of Hill House, and of course, the amazing Sai King adaptations of Dr. Sleep and Gerald's Game, those shows, Blind Manor and Midnight Club, were Flanagan working in writers' rooms and not directing all of the episodes himself. So he was spearheading the process. He was he was the showrunner essentially for both of those, but he also was not. It wasn't like as much involvement on a direct level, I would imagine, in comparison with those other projects where all of the writer and director credits, were his and his alone. Now, as he hinted at, that's presumably not going to be the case, if this show does in fact go to series. So he even just said right there, this is not a done deal. It's not guaranteed. I mean, they haven't even shot the pilot, let alone ordered it to series yet. But something else that he mentions in the interview is that, or that the interviewer from Deadline mentions, is the fact that, okay, Amazon obviously has interest in this IP if they commissioned a pilot to be shot in the first place with the Glenn Mazzara show running and stuff. And so, yeah, it shows that gives me a lot more hope if they had just a couple years ago interest in this property, that it's probably still there. They just wanted somebody with a little bit more recognition and esteem, coming onto it, because Mazzara, I believe, at that point was fairly far removed from The Walking Dead. Now, he was behind it, if I'm not mistaken, when the show was at its pinnacle of success and the most watched show on television at the time. But, it's like, it's always in this industry a what have you done for me lately? And unfortunately, with, Midnight Club not being, but, hey, he had already carved out his deal at that point. He still has one remaining Netflix show, which is the Edgar Allan Poe hodgepodge. And I don't use the word hodgepodge in some sort of negative manner. I use it in the fact that it's not just pulling from The Fall of the House of Usher. It's pulling from a number of other King books, kind of like what he did with Midnight Club, in the fact that it wasn't just, that book. It was other Christopher Pike stories that were folded into the narrative. But man, that's going to be his swan song with Intrepid at Netflix, and then from there on, it's going to be full steam ahead at Amazon. And him and Trevor both praised the fact that Amazon is a lot more daring in the fact that they're willing to give these bigger, huger budgets to things like The Rings of Power, which they praise in the interview. And they also praise The Boys, which is another amazing adaptation that has found its home and significant success at Amazon. And they praise most notably the fact that, similar to The Dark Tower, it's almost unclassifiable in its subgenre isms and all of the different flavors and factors that it, just puts into its melting pot. They said that was another reason that made Amazon so appealing, is because not only do they promote shows very well, also they like the template of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Weekly viewing, and the fact that it's like appointment television, so to speak. That's the term that I was searching for. And going to the weekly talk around the water cooler, that have everybody speculate over the course of a week on social media, and the fact that Netflix binge model is seemingly kind of broken to a degree. Now, personally, I'm notorious for waiting for the whole season of a show, if it's like Disney Plus or something, which I'm currently doing with Willow, to be completely up, and then I can just binge it all at once. So, guilty as charged, I'm guilty as charged. Do a Cox, yeah, I'm walking hard. And I'm walking hard towards hope that this transpires, but I do understand the appointment viewing and all of the just excitement that sort of model can actually build within your audience, and to help to build an audience, because if somebody is like, dude, you're not watching this? Well, hey, it's only 3 episodes in, so there's still time for you to catch up and still, join the discussion throughout the next, 5 weeks or whatever. So I understand Flanagan's just allure and just being enticed by that sort of thing too, because, yeah, I think The Dark Tower would be very much appointment television if done right. And there's pretty much nobody on the planet aside from maybe like a Guillermo del Toro that I really think could do this properly, because one of Flanagan's strengths more so than anything is character development, and didn't really have that in the Arcel film at all, and granted that, in the early on of especially the first book, there is a mysteriousness to Roland, and you kind of have that with the Idris interpretation and performance and stuff, and so for that reason I guess it kind of made sense, since it was drawing more so than anything from that first book in a lot of ways with him and Jake. But still, Flanagan's strength more so than anything is character development in a lot of ways. You see that more so than anything in Midnight Mass, which I adore so much. And you see it very much in The Haunting of Hill House. You see it definitely in the way that he directed and wrote Dr. Sleep, and just seeing, a grown-up Danny Torrance, and the way that Ewan McGregor put that performance together, and also just the way that he wrote Rose the Hat, just the way he made characters like Snakebite better, the way that he improved that Crow Daddy, he made some of those characters from Dr. Sleep more interesting in his film than were actually on the printed page, where they were slightly more one-note villains in a lot of ways. The True Knot were made significantly more fascinating in my estimation in Dr. Sleep. That's one of the few adaptations where I will legit say that Flanagan's film is better than the Sai King book. And there's not a lot of instances where I say the adaptation is an improvement upon the source material. I said it most recently about The Night Flyer, but then again, that was going off of a short story and expanding it into a feature. It's a little bit different of a situation, especially with a big renowned property like The Shining. So, I mean, hey, if there's anything that could be more intimidating than making a sequel to The Shining, I mean, I think that Flanagan is prepped and ready to do this. I'm going to read a little bit more from his interview right here. So he's like, I'll tell you, more than half my life, I've closed my eyes and been able to watch a lot of this play out. I've dreamed about this. That first shot, which comes right off at the first incredible sentence of the first book, The Gunslinger, I've had that image just rattling around in my brain since I was an undergrad. I'm going to have to get out of there eventually. I really need to get it out of my head. The pilot script is one of my favorite things I've ever gotten to work on. It's been surreal working on that. So we've been floored and grateful that Stephen King trusts us with such an undertaking, something so precious to him, and we hope to find the right partners to realize it. And so apparently he had been working with the King camp directly for a while. Thankfully, he had built their trust with those 2 previous adaptations, and since he had kind of raised his profile and prowess within the industry, and also with the floundering at Netflix, and with some of the regime changes, and with the fact that they're not promoting things very well, the fact that they put stuff on the chopping block as quickly as they do, all of these things worked to benefit the fact that now Flanagan and Trevor can pivot over with Intrepid, and they can work with Amazon, Amazon, unlike Netflix, they are not dependent upon these projects to be successful either in a limited theatrical form like Glass Onion was, which I'm so excited to see what is done with that one, because I've heard such great buzz, and it's coming out on December 25th, on Christmas, I believe. But I am just so stoked because of the fact that Amazon is like, no, we make all of our money from, sending out all of our products through Prime, and, we sell things. That's how we make our money. The Prime Video, all of that content is just kind of an icing on the cake sort of situation, and if it's unsuccessful, doesn't matter. It's very little skin off of our hides. It doesn't matter, to double down on that. And so for that reason, I believe that not only will they allow Flanagan to be, provided it goes to series, once again, fingers firmly crossed, but just the fact that he has King's blessing, the fact that he wants to go so ambitious with what he has envisioned as 5 seasons, as I said, and then he also mentions later in the interview that he imagines also rounding it out with 2 features, which I know lots of shows, most notably in the HBO format, have done that, where the series goes through to end. They did it also with Breaking Bad, right? So yeah, they're like, I'm thinking of what, Dead Like Me, I believe, did it on HBO. Anyway, long story short, lots of series have done that, where they have a fairly long-running series, beloved, and then they give it a little bit of time to simmer, and then they come back to it with a feature, maybe 2 features. What, Sex and the City did it, obviously. Not genre content, or at least not my genre, but nonetheless, it's a successful model where I believe you really build a following and enthusiasm with a number of seasons of lore building and just fan base building, obviously, as well. And then you can round it out with something bigger that could potentially be in theaters. I mean, what, they did it with Sopranos too, right? You know, although I think that was a prequel, but nonetheless, returning to that world. So I love how ambitious. I wouldn't expect anything else from Mike Flanagan with this particular property. I'm just beyond elated. I'm on cloud fucking 9, man. And this is just such exciting news for that just longtime constant readers, obviously Tower junkies like myself, as I said. And I'm going to pretty much leave it at that. I'm sure we're going to get additional stuff in the coming weeks about who is going to be, you know, casting is going to be big for this. I'll have to do a separate video once we get a little bit more context, because we don't know if this is going to be a pilot that flashes back and forth between young Roland and aged Roland, is all that I'm going to say. A very, very travel-worn Roland, or if we're going to just, you know, stick to him when we meet him in the original book, when he's, you know, going after the man in black through the desert and whatnot. So until we get some more details about how they're going to approach this and who is being cast as who, that may actually, like, maybe they'll start revealing casting of characters, and that will give more context about where Flanagan is going to take the narrative. But there's nobody that I can think of aside from the aforementioned, you know, heavy hitters like a Guillermo that I would entrust more so to this. And I feel like the fact that Flanagan has had this very adamantly as his holy grail, his passion project for so long, I trust him completely. And I hope this is not another revival situation where it's announced and we're all going friggin' bonkers for it, and then it doesn't happen. So yeah, everybody, for that reason, I am just going to cut it out there and extend a grande gracias. I've been Jaime and Fuego. You can find Wa on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Here on YouTube, I have recently made a return to higher learning, so that has kind of altered the amount of interaction on there for me just a little bit, but hoping in the coming weeks of some time off with the holidays and whatnot, I can at least get some stuff into gear. We have a lot of cool things coming here at the end of the year on the horror show, most notably. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, share this video. If you are a longtime viewer of this show, this is technically the 6th season that I have been doing it, having started. The pilot episode for this was way back in 2016 for King's birthday, and then things got started proper in 2017 with that year's King-assance. But yeah, what a pleasure to be covering this today. But as far as horror show stuff proper, we are getting together our best of the year, best of 2022, myself and Cecil. I think Robert is going to be a part of that as well. I'm not sure if we're going to remote Marsha Parker in. She just recently made a relocation to South Carolina from here in the deadly desert of Arizona, so that's a big thing, and hopefully we can get some of her picks and presents on that. But yeah, guys, lots of holiday-themed, scary stuff coming out. Christmas Bloody Christmas, The Mean One. I just saw Violent Night, although as much as I loved it, not really horror, but still incredibly enjoyable. And yeah, I'm not going to take up any more of your time. I'm going to link the Deadline interview, which gives a lot of additional insight that I probably glossed over or didn't even cover about not just this potential project, but also that just the departure from Netflix and the just reasoning and the rationale behind Flanagan and Trevor wanting to depart and pivot and switch gears and, you know, kind of take their talents, to quote old Bronny, over to Amazon Studios. So, I've been Fuego. Y'all have been rad status, and yeah, until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, I say hasta luego, sin amigos, constant readers and viewers alike. Say thank you. I am hopeful we have been well met. We share more of this palaver sooner rather than later, and until then, remember to stay scared and read Stephen King, El Rey, Sai. Oh my goodness. If you have not read The Gunslinger, get on it, because if all of the stars align, and they seem like they have, yeah, we have some amazing things on our hands.